This
All right.
conference will now be recorded.
All right. Good morning, guys. I'm just going to start sharing and start looking at our agenda. I want to share. Can you guys see my agenda slide? Okay. All right, I can see it. So I was thinking today's agenda will do the Samir and team has been working on the updating hotness tracking section. So we kind of take a look at it where it is. I made some changes, couple of diagram changes to end use cases. So I'll take perhaps 5 minutes to go through that quickly, but there's a lot more section to come in there. So it's not completely there. Anybody, I know Reddy should join in a few minutes, but I don't think there were any updates to the experience center yet. We are still waiting on it. So there wasn't anything new to be discussed on that. Anybody else, any topics that we wanted to bring in? I know we were thinking of, I just wanted to go through it. So there was going to be strawman proposal for software API. I think Pankaj, Pekan, and Brian were going to work on it, but I didn't have that date on it. So do you have Pankaj or Pekan, anybody who wants to kind of take a stab at what date we should target for that?
Manoj, I want at least 3 weeks because after the point 2 proposal, there is still requirements gathering phase. So I just want to quickly say that Vidushi Dadu at Google has been looking at it, and she has published a good paper in ISCA 2023 that says that a sea of accelerators will be needed to deliver end-to-end acceleration. I'm meeting with her at lunch today and might want to include her and invite her to this group.
Absolutely. And feel free to share this information about the group and wiki, etc. There is no separate calendar, but if you send me an email and introduce, I can make sure that I can invite her at least just on email.
And from a timeline point of view, let's give it 3 weeks, but Brian and Pekan, we should meet during these weeks to move the proposal forward.
So should I put it like 9/8 or 9/15?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so I'll put as 9/8 and we can review whether you're ready for at that time. And you said somebody from Google, right?
Yeah, her name is Vidushi Dadu, D-A-D-U.
Okay. I'll put her name as a question still once he joins. Okay. All right, and we did have discussion from Vikrant. If we had any section, we start integrating that in the document. We can review it again later.
Yeah, I did talk to Matthew yesterday, so
okay.
I have some follow-ups with him next week.
Cool, perfect. All right. Anything else for today's agenda item? Okay. Why don't we start with what I can, Samir, I think is already online, I think, but what I can do, Samir, if you're okay, I'll quickly talk about action items I had for the end use cases updates. It's not a lot, but I can just quickly share that and talk if you're okay with that, Samir.
Yes, Manoj, I will need a couple of minutes to get the document.
Okay. All right. So just action item that I had was basically start completing the use cases. By the way, I'll talk to Vikrant on this topic here also. But I had 2 top TBDs here on the caching use case. One was to make sure that I can update the picture to bring it in line with the system architecture specification that is been using now. The one thing that I think maybe Vikrant and Reddy, if we are already there, we should discuss it. How can we make this, since we are using it in Google Doc? Right now we're pasting these pictures from PowerPoint here, and it becomes very difficult to maintain consistency. I don't
Yeah, you
have a
need
great
to.
solution.
Yeah, you need to do some gymnastics with the drawing tool to retain the font. I can take a stab at it.
So take a look at it. What I'm doing is basically I'm adding this as a, okay, it's still not coming up right now, but I'm adding
Yeah,
this
no,
as
you
a,
need to go to
I'm
the
doing a
drawing
drawing and adding there. If, yeah, within Google, it is easier to do that doc if you just add it as a frame and then add, yeah, so you can dock it offline. If you add as a basically drawing, for some reason, this is not allowing me to, okay, I'm saying suggesting. Okay, now it will allow. Something is wrong with this, but it's not allowing me right now to edit anything. But
If you wish,
if you add
if
this
you
one
wish, you
document which
can.
is editable in Google Doc. Go ahead, sorry, Sam.
If you wish, you can get Google Slides to convert your PowerPoint into slides. Then it's easy to import it into
Yeah,
Google
but
Docs.
perhaps that's a good way to, yeah. But once we start doing everything in a Google Doc, then maybe we just have this in the Google Pictures so that we can copy paste and edit it later for different sections so that I can make it consistency. Right now, for now, what I've done is basically I've tried to keep the colors and fonts and similar. They're not exactly same, but hopefully they will look quite similar to what we have done in the other pictures that that have been used by Reddy and Vikrant and everybody. So I've tried to keep it same. It's not exactly same. I know it's a teal color. I have blue color. I know it doesn't matter as much, but just to keep the consistency.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. If you comment on that, I'll access the doc.
Okay, all right. So I've changed this picture. Essentially, this now caching use case is going to look consistent with what we have in the form factor submission, which is basically based to the this is a CXL memory buffer that we are working on with the access through CXL.mem, and the media is on the card and the form, and I'll add a pointer from here to the form factor section so that we have the physical specification pointing from here. So that was done. I've added a few more verbiage for multiple ways we will manage the memory, kernel driven as well as application driven. I still have the example TBD here. As we get the example of application driven page management, memory management, I'll put a section pointer here. So that would cover our use case for the caching database and data warehouse. Let me pause and saying that, is there anything else? If you guys can review it and see if anything else that I should add here and more information is required, then we can add. We'll have more information in the form factor section, which has actual physical implementation, which should also have information about how many lanes, how much memory, how many channels, capacities, and channel performance or frequencies required. This one is staying at the use case level. Would there be anything else that you would like to see from the use case? Please feel free to add comments. Let me just also show the
Manoj,
folder.
for use cases,
I don't know whether you guys have access. Yeah, go ahead.
For use cases, CacheLib can be used to evaluate the application-driven approach as well, because I mean Intel, did this enabling, and I think it might be a good exercise because we can evaluate it for both and see the value.
I'm missing the point. Say that again.
I mean that's the CacheLib is already enabled with application-driven approach as well, so that the same benchmark, the same workloads can be used.
Yes. Yes.
To evaluate kernel management and application-driven approaches. So it's a good point for CacheLib.
Okay. Gotcha. Let me just make sure that I captured it. So are you saying that, as long if you can put a pointers to the benchmarks that we're going to use for here, they should apply for both of them, kernel managed as well as application driven, should be able to compare them. Is that what you're saying, Sergey?
Yeah.
Okay. Discuss.
I guess I was kind of had a more general question on that, Manoj. Is there like a table at the bottom that's going to be the illustrated workloads for these particular use cases that you have, or is that TBD?
Oh, you're saying application and use cases and a benchmark table. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, that's also a good way to look at it. Okay, I can add it here. I'm trying to see where we added cache bench. Maybe I missed the whole thing here then, because we did have cache bench discussed, but I'm missing it here. Okay, here you go. System benchmark. So I'll put a pointer to the memcache system cache bench.
Manoj, since we have the benchmarks almost identified,
Yeah.
is anybody going to run these benchmarks and have
Yes.
some numbers in there too?
That's okay. I think we can start doing it now. Last year I had difficulty with it because most of these platforms were not publicly available. In Experience Center, we are going to have platforms which will demonstrate cache bench running, but I'm sure we should be able to publish the data. Let me take an action item. So your question is basically, can we put results in this document, or put the benchmarks in the document, but people can point to it and start publishing the data and contribute it?
Yeah, however it is, I know a lot of people are doing things on their own already. If
Yes.
we provide a mechanism for them to contribute their work and tabulate it and such, that would be good.
Okay.
Manoj,
Let me
actually,
add.
that reminds me. This came up yesterday with my discussion with Matthew as well. Like, do we have the lab systems that we had talked about last year for the group to access? Because I don't have a CXL attached device where I can run my spec CPU benchmark.
Yeah, I don't have that. So yes, that is one
I think
experiment. That,
Chris was working on that, right? And he had talked about a lab in Phoenix.
so we had a lab in planning. We struggled with this last year. We can try this year now again. I don't know whether Reddy is online now. The reason we struggled was some of these platforms are not publicly available, and getting multi-party NDA was a impossible problem for me to handle. We had a space in the lab, but how do we make sure that people have secure access to it without compromising everybody's data or everybody's non-public material? It's like this is a typical what we get into the interoperability testing or any kind of certification that happens in Lineage normally solves that problem. But we didn't have a structure for that to do that through OCP. I had a discussion with DJ and he had talks about OCP labs. I don't know, CMF, if you remember and are aware of any effort that has progressed on that. But for now, we don't have a place where people can have direct access and they can run an experiment. But it's open for discussion.
Yeah, of course, there are two aspects to this. If we can provide a system for people to use, either students or partners, is a good thing. But people somehow have access to systems on their own. If we have a repository for them, they may just want to publish that, and we just tabulate it for them.
Okay.
Hey, this is Nara. Manoj, should we have like a common framework, or I mean, not framework, sorry, common structure so that we have apples to apples if we are doing it?
What would you suggest? So in the benchmark, we can suggest a common configuration if that's what you're suggesting.
Correct. Or common configuration and structure to the way it is published so that it's comparable. Or
okay. Yeah, do you want to suggest something? So that gets into this cache bench area for us. So we set up the configuration there. We can bring that back in here, the hardware configuration. We were thinking of putting consistency by having the software configuration of what operating system, what device driver for TPP as an example we're doing. I see Sergey also has commented there that Intel has published through SK Hynix at a application level. So Sergey, maybe we can talk about how do we get access to it if that is publicly available. And then additionally, I think if you had any system configuration parameters that Nara, if you're thinking, perhaps we can add it here.
Sure.
Do you mind taking a control of this section and adding it there?
Sure, definitely. Yeah.
I'll share the document with you. I mean, this. Okay. Nara, I'll send you some of this is an OCP, so it's not showing up right now. But I'll
Yeah,
send you, and
I
then you can send me the
Sure, I'll send you the request.
Okay. Okay, I'm just dropping the link on your chat here. That's Nara is in Meta, so I can easily do these things quickly. Thanks, Nara. Okay, and Sergey, your comment was basically, I just saw the comment there you have, which is you have
Actually,
the SK Hynix data published, I think, right?
yeah, this is the data we captured together with SK Hynix. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it was done on an engineering sample, so there is no publicly available system yet. But
Okay.
the results I mentioned, so it's publicly available, so anyone can refer because it's in a public GitHub.
Yeah.
That is basically what I was suggesting. The data is available, is pushed out somewhere in the public. That's wonderful. But for us to kind of have a central place for it, and as was suggested earlier, if it is in the same kind of format that we can compare apples to apples, it would be very good for this team to come up with some structure for that.
Yeah.
So how about this one? I think let me add a section here which says cache bench performance data. Okay, what do you want to call it? Performance results, and we can add pointers to experiments that provide performance results for caching application. I'm just proposing just that we can discuss. So here what we can do is actually last section. So we will have this how to configure it. Sergey, we can work on it saying that, how do we do this for cache bench application modification, and how do we get that access to that stream? Because is it on the cache bench website? Sorry, GitHub?
Yeah, you mean traces? Which
The code for cache bench modification.
But
yeah, I'm assuming that you are taking you are contributing back the cache bench changes in open, or is this a private branch right now?
No, it's a public branch. So I posted the public link to our to Intel GitHub, to Intel fork of CacheLib, and now we are in the
that link is there.
Yeah,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And now we're in the process of upstreaming these changes to the meta repo. So we hope it will be in the metas repo.
Okay. Okay. So maybe, sorry, I will need, if I may impose, can you help here also to add all the GitHub pointers, which is with and without application modification, so that people can have access to that from this document itself?
Yes, I can do that. And please send me the link to this.
Yes,
document.
I will. Okay. And you can, I'm just adding the pointer here.
Hey Manoj, before we add all the data, if can we come up with like the hardware structure or profile as well as the performance profile that you have mentioned below? So some kind of standard table where people can fill in. Otherwise, the data can go all over the place.
Standardize the table. Okay. I'm just putting up the names right now just so that we can.
Sure.
Ajay, would you mind if I put your name on this one? so we can work on this. Sorry, I completely butchered your name, but hang on, sorry. Just want to make sure. Okay. Sergey, I just put the pointer to the document in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, and if you don't have edit access, just request it. It will come to me. Otherwise, I'll add your email address. Okay, awesome. So let me just mark it here as to be followed. And Nara will work on getting this. Okay, cool. So what this means is basically we'll have caching application covered from use case perspective and a benchmark perspective. And then as we get more, we can create the table that Brian, you are asking for. But at least for the performance data, I think we can have, Sergey, if you have it with the cache bench, with the cache bench data application changes, Nara, perhaps we can have with the TPP, right? Nara, you there?
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, so we'll check internally to make sure that what data we can publicly share or not yet, or at least we'll go through the legal review if we had to go through it. But we can see how we can get that data. So we have two implementation, TPP and application control. I guess, Sergey, you may have data with TPP also. I'm not quite sure.
Not yet. Yeah,
not yet. Okay.
We're actually in the process to set up it in our lab. And the main challenge is how to control the memory consumption per tier, because right now I think it's not easy.
Yes. Okay.
For the kernel memory tiering. And
perfect. This will be awesome.
So Manoj, just so you know, was talking to Daniel Berger about the workload stuff, and I sent him a sort of a straw man of things that he might be interested in. But when I talked to him about it, he was definitely interested in contributing to the overall workload benchmarking thing. So let me collate our thoughts, and then I'll share them with you and Reddy. We can decide whether we should incorporate them now or later.
That would be awesome.
Actually, Daniel, if we are working with Daniel in the same, almost in the same team on a cache, yeah, it would be good to invite him.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a bad week for him, so.
So I'm going to put this as just as a work item. We should revisit sometime, Brian, whenever you are ready for it. Should we just put it like 4 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, just as a timeline?
Manoj, if I may, since there is enough interest in this, let's talk about the structure of it a little bit earlier. The data might come in 3 weeks, 4 weeks time, but the structure and template and how to capture data, we could have a good
That's a good point. That's a good point. Let me just quickly show what we have right now from benchmark side, which is what we had this originally when we started the document. Was that for any benchmark, we will have hardware configuration, which right now is what Nara identified that this one doesn't have it. I think that's what Nara you identified, right? What is the hardware configuration?
We need a software configuration. Like we need to capture what the hardware configuration is, whatever the data is published against, and the format for data capturing, like the performance numbers. That's what I meant.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. But to you question, Sam, we can have a discussion right now. We are at 9:28 in 2 minutes, and then I'll give to Samir. So we have hardware configuration, software configuration, what metrics we are requiring, what are the system parameters that we are observing, and then the workload profiles, and then the performance
and some insights as well. Since this is a very esteemed team, more than just the numbers. Some people could say, hey, having a little bit more memory would have helped me. If I had less latency, would have helped me. If I, anyway.
Okay, good point. So under the performance results and takeaways, is that what you're saying?
Definitely. People could ask for more. People can contribute more.
Okay, we can create another new section if you want also for that. Just as an overall summary.
Either in the form of next steps or bottlenecks, identifying bottlenecks, saying if I had something of more of something, more bandwidth, more capacity, more cores, more accelerators or such, then I could do better.
Yeah, here's a case where like negative experiments, like things that did not prove fruitful, are actually interesting results.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll add that one more section here. So what I'll do then, CMAC, is basically, let's just go and look at the overall structure again as the table of content, and maybe we can ask if people have any specific
Right.
recommendations.
We can start with an example. If somebody has already done some work and would like to maybe present, we can start using that one as a structure, and other people can add and subtract, and it turns into something.
All right, sounds good. I think I'll send this out again as a table of content, what we had high level sections. Right now, just editing this part, the benchmarks part, under the component benchmarks, but it doesn't have the details on it. So let me publish this table of content back again to the team, and then if you can review and send back comments, that would then we can just add that. But I think it looks like this section can cook now very well, at least for cache bench caching use case. We have this now. I know I'm at 9:31. Let me just cover one more thing that I'm beginning to populate, and I'll start populating more, is basically our inference use case and how we are doing the hardware for that. Nara, I will work with you to see how we can get the benchmark information for this, or if we can use the cache bench itself as a continuation, perhaps.
Sure, sure.
So we'll start building it up, but I have added the picture, which shows basically that we have two socket system, but I'm still representing as a single host. Would like to take your comments if you guys think, since it's a two socket, should we show that's two hosts or not? But right now, just keeping it generic. It will have n number of CXL memory buffers for the high amount of memory that we need. The DRAM will max out on the what host will do. And then there are multiple accelerators that today access this memory over PCIe through the cache bench or cache lib equivalent hardware software that is running in the host. So I'll add the verbiage on how the use case works, but this is how the system diagram will look. I don't think we have a contribution on the hardware specification here on a system level. At some point we will, but the CXL memory buffer that we are going to talk in the contribution for the hardware specification applies here also. And in that section, we may continue to add more requirements for what this card would do. Okay. Hey, Brian, actually, Brian has put out a note, by the way, in the chat. Please take a look at it. He's doing good work on collecting the CMS research focus group. So please sign up who is interested. It's a lot of good, interesting stuff going there. I'm stopping here. I know I went way over than I was thinking, but that's a good progress. I appreciate that. So we'll work with everybody. I have action item to come back with a table of contents for the layout of the benchmark section. I'll be filling up the IML info section, and Nara and Sergey, I'll work with you for filling up the section for benchmarks for cache bench. All right. Let me hand it over to Samir. Samir, do you want to walk through your, if I figure out how to stop sharing mine? Okay.
Yeah.
And let me see if we have share permissions. If not, let me make it presenter. All right.
Okay.
So while Samir is bringing up, our goal is basically get this document with as many details as possible. We have the system architecture specific structure there now. We'll get one use case for sure and with a benchmark, and then now we get the control requirements that Samir is working on. Samir, all right.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So this is the section on hotness tracking we have added into this document, and couple of presentations have happened. There was a small group, we met and went through it line by line. Some good suggestions were made, so I have added all the comments. So the way we want to approach this is a framework for how hotness tracking will work. We have requirements defined here, uh, but the lower level definitions such as registers, uh, that work will be carried out through CXL consortium activity. So you will see that happening in CXL at some point. So at some point we are giving this ball to consortium and they will take it forward. This is how we are approaching this. Even at FMS, there was a very good participation. A lot of questions were asked. So I think we have generated enough interest. And there was a ask from Brian to define some use cases. So it's a fair question. We are asking for this feature, and implementers have they should know how we are really going to use it. So stay tuned. I'm going to put more detail on that as time goes. But at a high level, I think the point I want to make here is I think Daniel had come and presented earlier how this VM orchestration happens in the cloud. There is this uh, machine learning based orchestrator that has some statistics about the virtual machines, the kind of workloads, the kind of latency sensitivity they have, and based on that, these VMs are the resources are given to different VMs. So somebody has mic on. Can you please turn it off? The dog is really bothering me here. So thank you.
I think it's Tony.
Yeah, thank you.
All
I
right, thank you.
appreciate it. Okay, so so I will come and present these use cases in next few weeks, but a high level. This VM orchestrator will use this as a telemetry tool so that we can do better job in assigning resources for VMs. This can also go in the other way when a VM is already assigned a particular resource. Now the telemetry can be used to monitor, and it can go both ways. Some VMs are sensitive to latency, some VM workloads are not sensitive. So based on that, the resource can be moved in either way, either more main memory is given to certain VMs or more CXL memory is given to certain VMs. But at a high level, think of this, right? We are only talking about memory expansion at this point, but think in future what will happen when there will be a fabric attached memory, multiple layers of switches. So the delta between the main memory and endpoint CXL memory will increase in this fabric attached memory case, and you will see more usefulness of this feature as time goes. So I'm going to expand on this section in next few weeks, but let's go through the document, and we have I can go line by line. Stop me here, or you can read it further and suggest if there is anything important that needs to be captured. We'll capture it here. At a high level, this is only for capturing hotness on the CXL memory. We are not saying that we should define this feature for cold pages tracking on the CXL memory. This will be used. It counts CXL memory accesses from host CPU only. We are not asking any CXL.io accesses or P2P accesses to be managed to be monitored by this widget. So that point is very clearly said here. Widget counts all CXL memory accesses CXL.mem only. The next point is it will operate at a CXL port level. So there are certain other details into that. One is in case of multi-ported devices, there will be a widget per CXL port. So when I say widget, it's a small hardware block that will go inside the memory controller. And in case of multi-ported devices, there'll be one per CXL port. In case of interleaved CXL ports from a single host, there will be a single widget from this host. In case of MLD device, there will be hotness tracker per logical device. So this is about how this widget will be instantiated inside the CXL memory controller. The next point is on the method. So the method of hotness tracking is beyond the scope of this document. It is implementation specific, and this will be IP of the CXL controller vendor. They are free to choose any method that works well in terms of implementation, in terms of performance. So this is beyond scope of this document. The next point is widget should collect telemetry data at customizable granularities that is independent of CPU page size mapping. This is very important point. When we say that we will monitor at a, so the way it will work is we will start, if you have terabyte of a memory, and tracking hotness on a terabyte of memory at a very small granularity will be difficult. So we want to do it in two steps. In the first step, we want to find out hot regions at larger granularity. Let's say in a terabyte, I want to monitor at 4 gigabyte. And let's say I identified, say, 8 hot 4 gigabyte regions, then I'm going to zero in inside that 4 gigabyte region and will collect, say, top 16 4 kilobyte or 16 kilobyte regions. So having this customizable granularity is extremely important, and it has no relation to CPU page size mapping. Please interrupt me if anything you want to modify or need an explanation. So the next point is once configured, widget should operate independently to collect telemetry data that can be queried by software periodically. So software is not involved into this. Software will come and configure, and all the configurable knobs are defined in the following part of this document. But then once it is configured, the widget inside the memory controller will operate independently, and there is very little software involvement. Widget should expect that CPU can query periodically within the range of 1 millisecond to 10 seconds. So this is again another important requirement, because the hotness is the time window also matters a lot, right? So whether you want to monitor over a 1 millisecond or 10 seconds, so that is the window that can be set by software coming over the through the CPU interface. We are also requesting that telemetry data should include list of ranked hot pages. So for example, once the widget identifies, say, 16 hot pages, we are requesting whether the pages should be ranked. So that means the top of the list is the hottest, and in that following order. So they should be ranked. Uh, Now the next section is all about the tunables, the configurable parameters. And this is where we are asking these knobs, again defined by software. So one is the block size. We talked about it. That is all about the granularity of the region. Let's not use word page here because page has CPU page size. So we are just calling it block size here. The next one is the tracking can happen. You may track for read or write or both. So this is again a configurable. You can track for all the traffic, read, write, or both, right? The next one is on the counting interval. We briefly touched about it. It can be in the range of 1 milliseconds to 10 seconds. Uh, there will be a hot threshold. So the threshold is set by software, and anything above the threshold is hot. So you do not have to track anything that is below that threshold. Then there is a sampling rate. Sampling rate is also a function of the time window and the granularity. So maybe it's already captured in the definitions above, but we are just exclusively calling it out here. Uh, the number of hot pages for a given threshold. So I already talked about it. The number of hot pages software can come and request say 16 or 32 or 8. So that kind of flexibility should be there. Hotness definition. So the kind of the method or the algorithm that you want to use to track this hotness should be configurable. So it can be hotness can be based on the recency or it can be based on the frequency. Uh, so I think this is very important. So again, that's a tunable. It can be programmed. The next one is about software should be able to tell widget to zero in on hotness tracking for some set of address regions. Okay. So what I mean by that is, let's say in the first part, you're monitoring terabyte of memory, and then we identified, say, 16 4 gigabyte regions. But I'm not interested in all 16. I'm interested in, say, only three of those. So, so software should be able to tell widget to zero in on those 3 4 gigabyte regions instead of going into all 16. So that's what I mean by this line here. If configured, widget should be able to sort hot pages in priority. I made that point earlier, but it's based on priority, and the hottest is on the top of the list in that order. If configured, widget should be able to classify these pages in three buckets. That was the suggestions from last week. So the widget can create three buckets: high, medium, and low. So let's say I requested eight, and then you can put them into classify them into these three buckets, and then software can decide. Most of the cases can just target the high, and some cases it may look at all three buckets. So this kind of having this kind of additional information, whether it's number of buckets, the priority, it reduces software's job in terms of sorting all this information. So I think a question was asked: Can the CPU do all these things? Yes, of course it can do, but this is one thing where the widget can handle it, and it will be more useful if they can handle it. It's a little bit of an offloading function. The next one is important. The widget should work within confidential
Hey,
computing
Samir,
environment.
can I ask a quick question? Like,
Yeah.
should the configuration also include maybe turning off hotness? And the reason I'm asking is like, seems like the use case for hotness is more for the memory expansion, but if you're using a pooled memory configuration, I would treat the pooled memory and the main memory as equal in some sense, just a NUMA domain difference. So I expect the latency to be within the NUMA hop, and I would treat it as sort of a
Yeah.
contiguous memory region in that sense. So I don't want hotness to be
Right.
enabled.
No, no. First of all, right, this is an optional feature in that will be in CXL. So this is
Okay.
entirely up to the vendor's discretion to decide whether to add it or not. And to answer your question on pooling, I think our view is it will be beneficial even for pooling. We view pooling as nothing but expansion in a pooled environment. So even for pooling, it will be useful. But yeah, this can be turned off
Yeah,
if.
but the allocation that we're thinking of is not going to be so much like use demote and promote from main memory to the pool memory. We will
Mhm.
directly use pool memory
Okay.
for the lower tier containers.
Right. Correct. Yeah. 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 I agree. So this is entirely a add-on, and it can be turned off if required. Yep. I will write that point exclusively.
The fact that memory is pulled on CXL or not is independent of if that memory is being used often or not. So regardless of if it is pooled or just dedicated expansion, it is nice to know if the accesses are to certain regions, therefore software memory tiering can move it.
Yeah, it can be used as a telemetry, whether you
Okay. And now we'll ask her to, could you
okay.
wipe this? Hi. Just mop this stuff.
The next one is
Like a hallway? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
uh,
Thank you. Yeah, okay.
can,
Thank you.
can I request
You want to
anybody
make
who is not
that?
talking, please
Okay.
mute mic. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay, the widget should report hard page information based on device physical address. So essentially, it's the address that is available to CXL memory controller on CXL port. So that is the one that you are tracking. And it makes sense because it's happening inside the memory controller, CXL memory controller. Okay, the next one is again very obvious, but better to write it out. The widget is limited to CXL endpoints only. It is not for CXL switches or root points. So even if you have a fabric attached memory and couple of switches in the path, this will sit on an endpoint and the host will come and access it uh, from the endpoint and make a decision. There was another important point. Once this feature is implemented, the interop is very important. For example, vendor A has if has implemented this feature and vendor B also has it. How do you make sure if I have my infrastructure with a certain CPU software, it should work with both? So at some point, I think, yeah, the interop from vendor to vendor. But again, once it is part of the CXL consortium, and as long as people follow it, the interop should be easier to handle than building any custom solutions. So having this, see, this is another reason why we should have a common interface defined so that we can operate independent from vendor to vendor. Okay, so these are mainly the requirements for this feature. And we will expand on the section of the use cases. I have only 2 bullets right now, but we'll expand on it. And it's important that we are asking implementers and community to look for this feature, and we should give them more and more data on the usefulness of it. So anybody other than Microsoft, Nvidia, Meta, anyone, all the users of this, please look into your internal use cases and see whether you can add more use cases, which is good for the ecosystem.
Hey, Samir, I think this actually is an interesting question that somebody had raised before, but what this will be, once we have the benchmarks identified and data starts getting published, hopefully some of the system resource utilization that we are tracking, we should be able to demonstrate the advantage of it. For example, Cache Bench is going to demonstrate certain performance at certain CPU utilization, native memory utilization, bandwidth utilization, etc. With hotness tracking at that point of time, with or without, theoretically, we should be able to demonstrate that utilization of uh, resources, I guess. Just
Yeah.
making an observation that it gets connected to the benchmark also eventually.
Okay.
Because
Yes,
you're trying, the goal is basically, of course, that hey, we can achieve better performance because now I will be more efficient on the host CPU utilization.
Siamak, I agree to your point. I sort of coupled the case of using the hotness tracking telemetry to do certain actions, but we can choose not to act on that data that is exposed as part of the telemetry.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Vikrant, yeah, that is always the case, right? This
Yeah.
is just a telemetry tool, and
Yep.
whether to
Yeah.
act on or not is entirely up to the application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Based on Manoj's comment, maybe I can add this. True, once this is implemented in hardware in CXL memory controllers, we can use it for benchmarks, but I suspect that it will take a long time. So until then, There are other methods to do software memory tiering. Any of those could be applied to the benchmarks that Manoj mentioned as well. So in other words, we don't have to wait for this to be done in hardware before those things are useful.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this could be another discussion to see how we can tease out the data in the existing setups. I know our TPP work has identified it. We'll try to see how we can point it here. But
Yeah.
this is good. So I think just a question and comment in a way, Samir, here. This document is kind of we don't standardize here, so we're not going to necessarily make this as a requirement because there is no specification as such. But this
Yeah.
goes as a request to bodies like CXL to make sure that they take up as a work item. CMS also, you can correct me because you're on the both sides. And it can stay as a standalone document also for vendors to look at it as a common way we are thinking from end user side also.
Okay. And I think one more thing, right? Features like this, I think they add value to the CXL memory controller, and there are few others in the pipeline. We are thinking about those. We'll bring those in the OCP. But think about these I call low-hanging fruits, meaning they're not going to make your memory controller really big, but at the same time they add significant value uh, for to bring CXL memory into the main space of memory, right? So there are few others in the pipeline. We'll bring those, but as a community, everybody should think about it. What are some of these additional things? Uh, because the community has done a good job in defining CXL. CXL memories are also coming out, but how do we add some of these additional features that will increase or that will increase the usefulness of the CXL memory? So on those lines, yeah, as a OCP community, everybody should think what else can be done, and it's a healthy for overall ecosystem.
Yeah, hey, Samir, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, one of the things I've been thinking about as we, especially, in light of what you said about eventually CXL3 and switches and higher latency, is there is very much a dial or bandwidth um, effect that happens that when you allocate a certain capacity in CXL memory, and then as things get hot but are still suitable for a far tier, you might want to split your capacity across two nodes just to dial a higher bandwidth. This is
Yeah.
something that the HPC people have observed that some of their workloads, as they observe them, the capacity bandwidth ratio changes. So they want to split across more CXL nodes for higher bandwidth and get less capacity from each pool point. I don't know if that is within the sort of scope of the things you covered today, or is that going to be a separate thing from your point of view?
Yeah, from our point of view, it's a separate thing because if you just take an example of CXL memory is interleaved with main memory. Now this is a bandwidth play, right? So this is where the memory is looked at as one unified memory, and now it's interleaved. And some benchmarks have shown that the loaded latency, if you have a lot of bandwidth, I think that should be taken more seriously, right? So our view is we are looking CXL as a tier 2 memory, and this is where this feature makes sense. But if you are looking at it as a one unified memory between main and yeah, it doesn't make sense. So should be separate.
Okay. So that would be an example of what you were asking for.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of other areas one should start looking at how there will be emerging memories coming. They will be attached on CXL. and they will have different characteristics. So this is again to show the value of this particular feature. But going forward, in fact, if you look at the pricing delta between the emerging memories and the main memory, or even the NAND and the memory, that is changing a lot. So anything you can do on those lines will be, yeah.
All right. Any more question? I know I saw that Pekan had one question. Pekan, you had a question on there. I just want to make sure that we address that question. He had a question about should there be host ID be a parameter for tracking hotness for CXL device which supports shared memory region? Perhaps we can take that as a comment in the document and resolve it offline.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I know we are at the hour. By the way, I just started putting some pointers in the chat here. I will send out an email also. So there are two main things that I want to send out is that I'm capturing minutes in a shared document. Take a look at that. I'm also adding a pointer to weekly agenda tracker. So if you want to suggest something in a slot, feel free to use that. And that's basically what I had. Now we'll have for next week, I will have an update on the end user use case that we talked about. I'll work with Nara and Sergey offline to see what we can do, and then we go from there. We have action item ready. I don't know if the ready I see we here a clash later. But we will reach out to all of you guys who have the plan for the global OCP presentation as well as the experience center. And we'll make sure that we have the full agenda ratified properly. So that's Reddy and me and Syamak and all of us who have been working on the agenda. That's our action item. We'll cover it next week. All right. Thanks, everybody. And I'll see you next week. This is awesome. Good discussion and good meeting. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.